Good morning. Great morning. All right. My name is Malik Nevels. I'm the Executive Director for the Illinois African American Coalition for Prevention. And I want to welcome you to today's quarterly meeting and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. I want to take a moment to thank a couple of our staff members who helped plan the logistics for today's meeting, and that includes Dawn DeBoard and Talithia Redmond. I really appreciate all the hard work that they've put into today's meeting. I also want to acknowledge a couple other staff members we have here from the coalition, including Christy Roche, who is Roush. I saw you, Christy Roush, who is our Special Initiatives Director, Vernon Johnson, who is our Youth Initiatives Coordinator, and Alexis Adams, who is our Special Initiatives Coordinator. I also want to thank the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission, especially Esther Franco-Payne in particular, for helping plan today's community forum on youth parole. I also want to acknowledge another important partner of the coalitions, especially it's one that we work with on the Neighborhood Recovery Initiative, and that's the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. And we have Wendy McCambridge and Lori Jenkins joining us here today, so thank you for coming out. We appreciate it. So we're here today for a community forum on youth parole, and what I'd like to do is provide you with a little backdrop on the juvenile justice system here in Illinois. Somewhere I heard that content without context is simply pretext. So if you bear with me, I'd like to list out a couple of facts about the juvenile justice system. Illinois has a total population of 12 million. Approximately 3 million, or 24% of that 12 million, are under the age of 18. There are currently 969 youth in detention in 8 Illinois youth centers across the state. Greater than 50% of them come from only 7 communities, and the average age is 17. Most of these youth have common family histories of criminal behavior, mental health, and substance abuse, and they come from neighborhoods in which 80% live at or below the poverty line. Illinois, like many other states, struggles with overrepresentation of youth of color in the juvenile justice system. While African American youth constitute 18% of the state's total youth population, they make up 57% of youth arrested, 41% of youth in locked detention, and 52% of youth in locked state facilities. The Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice releases more than 2,400 youth back into the community every year. A study by the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority on youth released from IDJJ between 2005 and 2007 revealed that 86% were rearrested and 68% were reincarcerated within 3 years. Illinois' reentry system for youth, ostensibly created to help juvenile ex-offenders move from the prison cell back into their communities. However, a recent youth reentry improvement report commissioned by the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission found that the system does little to prepare youth and families for the youth's return. Paroled youth rarely receive needed services for school linkages. Youth are often returned to expensive youth prisons due to technical violations. The Prison Review Board parole revocation proceedings are perfunctory at best, where the youth's due process rights are not protected. And unlike the adult parole system, and this is something that I learned more recently, is youth serve an open-ended sentence, which means that a youth can be sentenced to 3 months at the age of 13, but be on parole until the age of 21, an entire 8 years. Last but not least, the Illinois Auditor General estimated that it cost an average of $86,861 per year to incarcerate a youth in one of our state's juvenile detention facilities. In contrast, it only costs $16,140 per year to send that same youth to school at a public university, $17,000 per year to have him or her participate in Youth Build, and between $3,200 and $7,280 per year to enroll him or her into an effective community-based treatment program. So that's kind of the landscape of our state's juvenile justice system. As one can imagine, it sounds like it's a broken system. Now there's the good news. There's a movement afoot here in Illinois to reform our juvenile justice system, which includes reducing disproportionate minority contact with the legal system, promoting a greater degree of accountability and fairness in sentencing and supervision, and moving away from a youth parole system based on control and surveillance to a system modeled on treatment. Today's panelists represent what I believe to be a diverse cross-section of public and nonprofit actors who are helping to reform our system. And I'd like for you to join me with a warm welcome for Esther Franco-Payne, who is the Program Director for Metropolis Strategies. Ms. Payne leads the policy development and implementation on criminal justice issues focused on childhood exposure to trauma and violence, juvenile justice, diversion, and alternatives to incarceration and reentry. She also co-chairs the Communication Committee for the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission. Esther has over 10 years of experience in working to reform Illinois juvenile justice system. Arthur Bishop is the director for the Illinois Department of Juvenile Justice, appointed by Illinois Governor Quinn in August of 2010. Director Bishop is responsible for the oversight of an agency that currently includes 8 facilities statewide, approximately 900 youth, and approximately 1,100 employees. He has over 37 years of experience in the field of social service, working in the areas of community mental health, substance abuse, and child welfare. He also is a member of the Juvenile Justice Advisory Board and co-chair of the Illinois Juvenile Justice Leadership Council. Immediately to the right of Director Bishop is Juliana Stratton, who is the Executive Director for the Cook County Justice Advisory Council. In her current position, Ms. Stratton spearheads Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle's criminal and juvenile justice reform agenda. She's the co-chair of the Cook County Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative Executive Committee, a member of the Juvenile Justice Leadership Council. There's a lot of justice in the bios, I noticed. And serves on the Justice and Health Initiative Steering Committee in addition to being a restorative justice practitioner. And to the right of Ms. Stratton is Lisa Jacobs, who is the program manager for Illinois Models of Change Initiative. Ms. Jacobs works with justice system practitioners, advocates, and policymakers to implement positive policy and practice changes in the Illinois juvenile justice system. She is an attorney, working on the good side, I might add, with more than 15 years experience in criminal justice, juvenile justice, and human services issues. In addition to her current job title, she also sits on the Illinois Juvenile Justice Commission and serves as chairperson of the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority Board Planning and Research Committee. Please join me in welcoming this fine panel of justice advocates. So what kind of the format that we're going to follow today is we're going to ask each of our panel members to come up to the podium and present a little bit about what their respective organization is doing in the area of reforming juvenile justice in our state. They'll have about 7 minutes, and after that, we're going to really open up the floor for a Q&A with the audience. So we will begin with Lisa Jacobs.
Good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to be with you here today. And I think my charge is to do what the director referred to as providing some of the context for the discussion today. To give an overview, a sort of a 10,000-foot overview of what's happening in the world of juvenile justice reform, at least insofar as we are working on it. And there's a lot of other work out there being done too. This is sort of the 10,000-foot view of what our organizations and what's happening at the state level in juvenile justice reform. And, you know, I probably could make this really short, and I was struck when you said there's a lot of justice in all of these titles and organizations. There needs to be more justice in what happens with young people in conflict with the law. And in some ways, that's all that really is what our work comes down to. My day job is as the director of the Models for Change initiative. It's funded by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. And Illinois is one of 4 core states involved in the Models for Change initiative. Pennsylvania was the first core state chosen, Illinois was the second, Louisiana was the third, and Washington State is the 4th. People often ask, well, the first thing they ask is, can I get some money, because everybody knows the MacArthur Foundation has a ton of money. They don't give me the checkbook. The second thing they often ask is, why was Illinois chosen? Does that mean we're doing really poorly on juvenile justice? Does it mean we're doing really well? And I think it's both of those things. I think Illinois was chosen because there's a lot of momentum and a lot of energy and a lot of good things happening in the juvenile justice world in Illinois. But we have a lot of progress that needs to be made. And so Models for Change was around accelerating that progress and bringing together the people doing the good work in Illinois to really be deliberate, about creating, building, and sustaining a juvenile justice system that works. It's taken us a really long time as a group of advocates and a group of partners to really develop consensus about what we think it means to have a functioning juvenile justice system. I am a member of the Juvenile Justice Commission. We've got 2 other members sitting up here. We almost have a quorum for a meeting. And they know it took us almost a year of really heartfelt discussions to create some key points about what an effective juvenile justice system looks like and does. And it really boils down into 3 things. For us, an effective juvenile justice system is one in which kids and families don't get involved unless absolutely necessary. That kids and families should not be arrested and brought into the court system, brought into the probation system, detention, the Department of Juvenile Justice. They should not be in that system unless it's absolutely necessary. And too often in Illinois, and probably every other state, we see kids and families come into the justice system for things that the justice system isn't equipped and never will be equipped to deal with well. Things like education problems and educational deficits, things like mental health needs and substance abuse treatment needs, things like family crisis that can better be dealt with in the community. So really making sure that our system, the system of laws and policies, don't pull kids and families in unnecessarily is the first marker of an effective juvenile justice system. The second is that when kids and families are involved in the justice system, whether it's here in Chicago in Cook County or the farthest southern county in Illinois, Pulaski or Alexander County, for example, that what that system does is rehabilitative, that it's youth-focused, that it's not based on an adult model of punishment, incarceration, any of those adult models that frankly don't work really well on the adult side are especially problematic and destructive on the juvenile side. So making sure that it is youth-focused, that it's individualized and we don't have categorical approaches to youth, making sure that we're supporting families, making sure that what we do is geared toward the third marker of the juvenile justice system, which is positive outcomes. not just measuring things like rearrests and recidivism, which are important, and we need to do a better job of that, but that we're actually looking at the kind of positive outcomes we want for kids and families. And those positive outcomes are linked, we know logically, and by research, that's linked really closely with public safety. When we can produce positive outcomes with and for kids and families, educational success, job opportunities, well-being in their homes, in their families, that enhances public safety. So it's those three markers that all of this work is really geared toward in one way or the other. To step back and remark upon the context, I think really at the end of the day, what a lot of this work has been about is understanding how the system actually functions. You would think people who spend their lives being juvenile justice practitioners in one way or the other, that we'd have a really good understanding. Everybody would understand how the system functions, what it does, when, why, what does it cost, what's the impact. And the fact is, we don't. We certainly didn't probably 6 or 7 years ago when we launched this piece of the work in Illinois. We're getting a lot better at that. But that's really been one of the first things we've attempted to do, is to bring people together and to map out how our system functions, to create a common set of facts, not just anecdote about this is how I think it happens, or this is what I've seen, or this is how I handle my piece of the system, but how does that system actually function? What do the laws on the book say? I'm always surprised how many people, including myself sometimes, don't know what the law actually says and what actually happens. So creating that common understanding. I think Esther's going to talk about how the Juvenile Justice Commission has played a role in really kind of system mapping and understanding that. And then also I think the other important that our work has involved is bringing together people. Bringing together people who do the work in communities across the state, bringing together those people and really understanding where the juvenile justice system, the court system itself is adversarial, but there are goals that we can agree upon. There are things that we can agree upon. So bringing together people, bringing together those areas of consensus, and then figuring out how to forge ahead. And one of the ways we're doing that too is creating models of positive practice. A lot of folks are doing really good work in communities at the local level that we can document and we can offer out and say, this is a model for change. This is a model of good practice that does those three things I mentioned earlier. It helps keep kids out of the system whenever possible. It helps produce a rehabilitative and youth-focused system, and it helps produce positive outcomes. So really understanding and documenting those models. And then I think the last thing that this work is really about, and I think you'll see it illustrated through the rest of the panel, is creating a voice for juvenile justice. The adult criminal justice system really drives a lot of state law, policy, funding. Juvenile justice needs to have a voice, sometimes we say a locus of reform. And that's what this work has been about too, is creating a focus on juvenile justice, creating a voice for these issues. And so that's why I think today's discussion and ones like it are so important, because it helps us create a larger network, a larger understanding of what you see and what's important at the community level, and strengthens that voice. We've got several big policy proposals in the works. Esther's going to talk a little bit about that from the commission standpoint, and your voice, I think, is going to be critical in continuing to accelerate the pace of reform. So I think that's the 10,000-foot view and the context that we're working in.
Thank you very much. Next, we'd like to bring up Juliana Stratton from the county.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Juliana Stratton, Executive Director of the Cook County Justice Advisory Council. In that role, I manage the public safety portfolio for Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the initiatives from the county level. We don't specifically work in the area of paroled youth, but we will talk a little bit about what happens at the front end as young people come into our juvenile temporary detention center and what can happen in terms of reentry and some of the other initiatives. But before we get started, I thought we could take just about 1 minute, maybe not even a minute, but at your table, if you wouldn't mind just turning to a couple of people next to you and share if you have ever, I'm just asking if you have ever, when you were a teenager, if you ever did anything that would be considered stupid or risky, something you shouldn't have been doing. But you don't have to share what it was unless you want to be bold, because I saw everybody like, I can't talk about that. But if you did something that you know was stupid, you shouldn't have been doing, and people, you know, and back in the day, you really just shouldn't have done it. Just talk about that for a minute. Did you do it? Oh, there's one table where I see nothing. Okay, there we go. All right, if you want to share anybody want to share what it was? Okay. All right, so let me ask a question. Come on back, come on back. Question to everybody here. Was there anybody who had nothing? You were the perfect child, the angel. Oh, we have one. Oh my goodness. Please stand up, sir. Please stand up. We want to applaud you. All right. Now sit down. Now let's applaud everybody who was honest in the room. Oh goodness, thank you Malik and to the Illinois African American Coalition for Prevention for this opportunity to share. And I just started with that because I think it's so important in the work that we are doing with young people to always kind of keep in the backs of our minds that all of us have done something that would have been maybe not necessarily considered criminal, but considered stupid. And the reality is a lot of the stuff that was considered stupid for us in our generation is now being criminalized. And young people are ending up, for some of those same behaviors, are now ending up in our juvenile justice system. And so we have to kind of think about that and have that level of compassion and empathy for the young people that we're working with. Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, as she was running for the office and as she was transitioning into the office and as she has been in the office for these 2 years, has been a staunch advocate for justice in Cook County. And she has been a very vocal proponent of looking at alternatives for our young people, alternatives to detention, not just for our young people, but also looking at what's happening in our Cook County Jail. The Justice Advisory Council primarily was a grants management office. And when she came in office, she said, I want a particular office to really focus on some of these justice issues. And our office has 4 key public safety goals. Number 1, to reduce the populations at the Cook County Jail and the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. Just to give you a little context, at the jail right now, the population hovers around 9,800. About 9,800, about 70%, and remember this is as young as 17 years old. So I think it's important for you to hear that as well, because we are talking about young people, but I still consider 17-year-olds as young people, of course. So we have about 9,800, about 70% of those individuals are currently charged with what would be considered nonviolent offenses. Okay? 90% of those in our Cook County Jail are there pre-trial. So it's not really those that have been sentenced in any means to the jail, but those that are pre-trial awaiting, so they have not even been convicted yet. And we do so, we detain people at the Cook County Jail at a cost of about $143 a day. So think about that. $143 a day to be detained in a jail while you are awaiting trial. Sometimes those charges get dropped, right? Okay, so we are, as taxpayers in Cook County, are paying to detain many people who have relatively low bond amounts, sometimes because they can't afford it, can't afford $200 bail, or can't afford $300 or $400 bail, so they continue to linger in the jail. On the detention center side, there's been a lot of progress made in Cook County. In the early 2000s, there were closer to 800 young people that were detained in the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. About a year ago, there were approximately 300, and President Preckwinkle set the goal of reducing that population at the detention center by about 50. And so I'll talk about the process that we went through to do that, but we were able to accomplish that goal over the last year. And it currently, although today, and if you've seen the Tribune, there's an article that talks about there's been a slight uptick over the last couple of months, but we were able over the course from December over the last fiscal year to get that population down some through collaborative efforts. It cost about $600 a day for a young person to be detained at the Cook County Juvenile Temporary Detention Center. And so when you think about $600 and what could be done in a community with $600 a day per young person, the question often becomes, where is the investment going to be? So the first goal, public safety goal for President Preckwinkle, is to reduce the populations at the detention center and at the jail. The second goal is to do so in a way that preserves public safety. And that's why I brought up the issue of those charged with nonviolent offenses. The goal is not to say no one should be detained. Let's just let everyone out. That's not what the goal is, and sometimes that message is not often clear. The question, as Lisa said, is how do we specifically identify through a number of different instruments, through data, how do we identify those that really would pose a risk to their communities or to themselves or some other risk to others, and they really do need for the safety of everyone to be detained. But how many are there that don't need to be? And so when we talk about preserving public safety, we highly value public safety, and we understand, in fact, in Cook County, public safety is the largest part of the county budget. It's about 40% of the county budget. So we have to think about how to preserve public safety as we carry out these efforts. Third goal is to promote successful reintegration into communities. So when people are coming from the jail or from the detention center, how do we help them to integrate into their communities in a way that they are properly supported, reintegrated, and reconnected with their families, reconnected with their schools, reconnected with their communities, so that they do not end up cycling in and out of the jail. And then the fourth public safety goal is to promote fair and equitable access to justice. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes, and I know we'll have some time for Q&A later, but let me just talk a little bit about some of the things that we are particularly doing as it relates to youth. First of all, we have what's called the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative in Cook County. This is a national initiative through the Annie Casey Foundation that actually has been working with Cook County for about 20 years now, and has helped with that reduction from about 800 youth to now down to 250. And what it is a collaborative. So we include all of the public safety stakeholders, including the state's attorney, the public defender, the Chicago Police Department, who am I missing? I should know, the judges, juvenile probation. We include community-based organizations, we include faith-based organizations, and we include academia to come together to talk about some of the strategies that we need to be focused on. And so we come together and we have meetings and we talk about what do we each need to be doing as stakeholders in this process, in this system, to help reduce the population. President Preckwinkle, towards that end, last year invested $800,000 into community-based organizations to help build the capacity of organizations that provide detention alternatives. This year, we increased that to closer to $1.5 million, because the concept is, although we cannot do, as of yet, a dollar-for-dollar reinvestment, the idea is the less that we're spending on detaining people, the more that we can invest in community-based alternatives to detention. But we have to get the population significantly down so that we can begin to close some of the housing units in these facilities, because staff in the housing units, that's where the key costs lie. So the JDAI process goes forward, and it's a collaborative effort. We've made the investment, and what I love about that process, and for those of you who have heard from Bart Lubau at Annie Casey, they use what's called the My Child standard, which is, if it were my child in this system, would it suffice? Would this be an okay system? And if it's not okay for my child, then what kind of changes need to make? So those are the questions that we're asking. I'll just mention a couple of other things briefly to allow time for the other presenters. One is, so in addition to what we're doing with JDAI, there's also a city-county collaborative on public safety called CARE. That's the Community Anti-Violence and Restoration Effort. When President Preckwinkle and Mayor Emanuel took office, they said we share a building, we share the 5th floor of this building, but we don't do a lot together. And public safety was one of the, I think it's 7 different areas that they decided to collaborate. So I co-lead for the county side, the CARE Collaborative. And we have identified 11 key initiatives to reduce violence and stabilize communities. We see those as going hand in hand. And I can talk about more some of those initiatives and some of the things that we are doing within the communities towards that end. Finally, I'll mention our Cook County Violence, it's a long name, Cook County Violence Prevention, Intervention, and Reduction Advisory Board. This is a recently established board by President Preckwinkle and the Cook County Board, and it has 3 key goals. First of all, well, 3 charges more so. First of all, to explore the feasibility of gun court in Cook County, and that's a very broad term. It's not, we are still exploring what could work in a way that also continues to promote the goals that we have, the overarching public safety goals that we have. But secondly, and this may be of interest to many of you, we have some money to spend towards violence prevention and intervention efforts. Right now, there are 2 RFPs that are posted on the Cook County website. First of all, for recidivism reduction, we are offering 5 $80,000 grants. If you go to the Cook County website, procurement page, look under Justice Advisory Council, 5 $80,000 grants for recidivism reduction. And then we have $1.9 million in grant funding that we are offering towards violence prevention and intervention efforts. And that grant is, that we have not even had the pre-proposal conference for that one yet. So if you check online, you can get that information. But I say all that to say that what's happening with violence in our communities has a direct impact on what we are seeing happen with our detention populations. And our ultimate goal for all of us should really be no entry. We talk about re-entry, but we really want to see no entry into the system. So we can talk about a lot of those principles further. I think my time is up, but thank you very much for your attention.